Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Breaking Limits podcast, episode number 3. Today, we're going to talk about the control trap, where we are breaking patterns that keep us stuck, right? Guys, parenting a child with special needs can feel like you're constantly pushing through barriers, whether it's emotional, financial, medical, or even societal. It's a journey filled with love, but often marked by isolation, unanswered questions, and moments that make those questions if you're not doing enough. So that's why this podcast exists, practically, right? And Breaking Limits isn't just a show, it's a movement. We are looking at voices for the voiceless parts of this parent's experience as they navigate the space for the children with special needs. So I'm here, Dr. Vivian Pierre, and I'm parent, Emily Woods, who herself, she is a parent of a child with special needs, Miss Georgia, who has the diagnosis of FOXG1. You will be learning more about that as we go through the different things that we talk about as we go through different podcast episodes. Today, however, I realized, Emily, that I really didn't tell anyone or tell our viewers a little bit more about myself. So we started with your story, right, in podcast 1. And so what we're going to do is I wanted to let people know kind of where we are and why it is that we're even doing the podcast just before we jump into today's episode about taking back control. And so as Dr. Vivian, I am a physical therapist of the last 20 years. Ooh, can't believe it's been 20 years.
Don't blink.
Yeah, that's what happens. In a blink, it's gone. I have definitely been involved in the healthcare industry for a long time in many different areas: outpatient, inpatient, occupational medicine, and most recently the pediatric space. And in the pediatric space, it really opened my eyes to some things that we really needed to jump right into because there was a lot of lack, there was a lot of hurt, there was a lot of overwhelm. And it's something that I feel very strongly that needs a voice to that space. You have been a great parent advocate for your child, for your community, for different things that are happening. And so, in that space, what it reminded me of is, believe it or not, took me all the way back to when I was 9, 10 years old, and I felt invisible in that space. And feeling invisible in that space really made my voice shut down. And I felt very akin to the space that I feel when I speak to parents, when I speak to my clients, that they feel they do not have a voice. And that's not a great place to be in.
It's a really hard space to be in, let alone navigate everything else that's going on.
Yeah. And for me, another huge space that existed in my life is when, unfortunately, my mom passed away from breast cancer, as you know. And I was devastated in that space. And when my mom passed away, I felt isolated, but I felt like I failed her. I was a physical therapist. I felt that maybe I could do more. I had so many unanswered questions in that space that I was taking on the brunt and this feeling of being not enough and the feeling of not being able to care for a loved one. So I felt like I truly let her down as a physical therapist and as a daughter.
I think space it's kind of irrelevant who that person is in your world. Like when you start feeling that, because it's essentially the helpless feeling. And as the person, as the adult, as the person who should maybe be doing the caretaking, like you feel like you're the one that's supposed to fix it all, especially when it's someone very close to you, when that natural, like as a parent, naturally you take care of your child. As your parent ages, you naturally take care of them. And when you can't fix it, then it brings on a lot more of the negative emotions.
Absolutely. The what ifs, right? The questioning of self. And that space, like you said, that helpless space is a space that I myself, because, I'm from Trinidad originally, and in that space of helplessness, I felt I didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who to talk to, and I really kept a lot of that in. And to be quite honest with you, I was angry and grieving for about a good 2, 3 years solid. And I only connect those dots moving backwards, looking backwards, not when I was in the space. And sometimes it takes someone close to you to point out the things that are in your blind spot that you may not be aware of or seeing. And that's what happened to me and really shook me out of that space, but brought me back to the path of, you know what, I did everything that I could at the time. And I
Yeah.
had to give myself grace and had to forgive myself. But it still brought up that feeling. So when I started working in the pediatric field, and a lot of the parents were coming to me with this helpless feeling, I felt very akin to that. And part of why we teamed up to do this podcast, just so that you guys know, is to really bring clarity and bring support to a space where people do feel like they are alone and isolated. And Breaking Limits, we wanted it to be a voice to the world about this space specifically around kids with special needs. The guilt, the grief, the unexpected joy at times, right? For the things that happen that you're just basking in, the sun about all the different things that people may not have thought was possible and now have become possible. I know Emily knows a little bit about that and she's going to keep sharing with us, but that invisible weight and that the winds that only a parent in your shoes can understand. And the hope is that we can bring in experts, we can have discussions, we can really get down to the root of some of these thinking that we have around the space, but also to be able to find solutions and to help people find solutions so that when they make decisions that's right for them, their families, which is very individual, that they feel a sense of peace and calm and know that they're doing the best that they can, and that's all that.
I think that when you get to that point and when you truly feel that, that's when a lot of that weight is lifted. Because without navigating it differently, we get bogged down and kind of stuck in a rut.
Right.
And that's when we have to really reevaluate things. And most of the time that reevaluation comes back to, what else can I do? What else is there to be done? What did I do wrong? And it just kind of turns into this
Kind of
spiral of really nothing that you can do anything about.
And that's what brings us to today's episode. We really wanted to dive deeper into the space of the areas that we can control and the areas that we can't control. And the fact that it traps us and it allows us to get stuck in those patterns that we feel that we have to control everything. And it doesn't allow us to release and let go of those things that may be keeping us hostage.
Yeah, that definitely feels just like that. Like you can't escape it. There's no way to change the path or change your trajectory because you literally just don't even know where you can go with it. There's nothing that's like published or Googleable to help you.
Oh, that's a new one. Googleable.
It's my word.
I like it.
So I think the biggest thing is to understand what you can and can't control, because it looks very different, but not, because we all have like really similar control when you really look at it on the most simple level.
Well, we want to feel in control. Feeling out of control is never great.
Humans like to be in control.
Right? We never feels like things are spiraling and we don't have a say in the matter, or it's happening to us and we're not able to affect the change or affect the outcome that we're looking to achieve. And so that can be a very scary place. That can be a very enraging place, frustrating place as such. But ultimately, it is the place by which we make a lot of decisions in our lives, or how we allow things to affect us or not affect us in one way or the other. So let's start on this, because today's episode really is titled The Control Trap: Breaking Patterns That Keep Us Stuck. And let's start off by just asking a very simple question. Emily, have you ever felt like, you had a day when things were happening to you.
I'm sure there's a few.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of any like off the top of my head.
So like in that space where you feel like you're trying to control, you're holding on so tight. Like I've spoken to parents who they would say they would bring up the school system, let's say, or the medical space, right? Or the insurance space where they're trying to make things happen, but they're getting bogged down by the system, right?
Yeah.
The system that's we talk about is not set up for us.
I think if I had to pick maybe a time frame, but not a specific day, and I would say that was early on, like right around when we got our diagnosis, and it was like, okay, this is what it is, and then you go home and you're like, okay, I'm gonna find out what this is about, and you can't find anything. Like there's no real direction for us. And like I've said before, it took me a good year of just kind of wallowing in that, like realizing that really this, like all I could remember thinking is, this is what I'm seeing and this is what I'm being told, and they just don't line up. Like this is two separate puzzles completely, because they don't work together. And like I said earlier in one of the other episodes, when I fell asleep on the floor and I wake up to her eating an entire plate of lasagna, I realized that she's gonna do whatever I let her do. If I can empower her to do it, she's gonna do it. And that world is very different from the world that I thought I was working in. So at that point, it was like, I need to really stop and look at what is it exactly that I can do, and what do I need to like stay away from or avoid or kind of take off the plate, because it's not working. Like these things are never going to mesh together.
Well, the real shift really is not just always about what are all the things that we can fix, right? To your point, around those things that you have to let go and allow to happen in that space. Because in that space, I remember you were talking about you're trying to get her to eat, you're trying to get her to do these different things, and it wasn't happening. And the moment that you let, I mean, what better way to say this? You were asleep. You were not even dealing with the situation, right?
Well, I didn't think there was a situation to deal with.
Right.
So it was fine to fall asleep. It wasn't like she was going to scoot across the floor and eat an entire plate of lasagna. That was not a reality.
Right. Well, she didn't do that before.
Until I woke up.
Right. And then it became your reality. Absolutely.
It was a reality. And then it was, I think I'm missing some big pieces of what's actually happening here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So many times we find ourselves in that situation. So what I want to do is, let's do a deeper dive into maybe in this space of parents, what are some of the things, let's go down and maybe list some things and talk about a couple of things as to some of the things that are coming up for them that they're holding on so tight to that they may not be in charge of. Some of the things that may not be, that they cannot affect.
Yeah.
And they want to so badly, but ultimately we can't affect. So let's start on the uncontrollable side. Okay? So on the uncontrollable side, let's look at, give me one thing that you feel very strongly about that exists in this space that people feel that they can control, but it really doesn't show up that way. It's really something that they have to let go of and allow the process to take course.
I'm going to start with the diagnosis period.
Sure. Great place to start.
They've given it a name. There may or may not be help or guidance within that. But you can't change that. It's going to play out somehow. But you cannot control the fact that it exists in your life.
So let's put that down here. We're just going to add that to our list here. We're going to put, so uncontrollable is the diagnosis. So the severity of the condition, can't do anything about that. That is what it is at the moment, right? How fast your child progresses within that diagnosis. How do you feel about that being a controllable or a non-controllable?
Where I am today with, considering Georgia,
Right?
I feel like if I had understood a few pieces of it early on, we would probably be further ahead.
Okay.
Just because there's almost like a mechanical mechanism to it that changed our path.
So the decision-making process was changed based on the information.
Yep.
But you can control the ability for you to gather information or what you did to do that in that space.
Yep.
But ultimately, could you control how fast she progressed?
At that point, no.
Right? Even with therapies, as a physical therapist, we're working with the kids and we're trying to help facilitate the changes that happen. And there is some things, there's a desired input, so we can get a desired output. Whether it's a sensory input, we're looking for a motor output. But ultimately, the changes that happen, the neurology that happen, we're simply facilitating it. How fast that happens, we can facilitate, but do we really have control over it?
No.
I would argue, yeah, exactly. I would argue with you that we don't. So maybe the controllable is really, how are we approaching that? What are we doing to find out the actions what we're taking around the diagnosis?
I feel like you could probably control your education around it.
There we go. So let's say actions and education. We're going to add that in there. Love it. All right, what's another uncontrollable that you feel that can happen as well? Because I got a big one. Because it's a pet peeve of mine, and
Okay,
I
I
totally
think
want
I
to
know
bring
what
it
it is,
up.
but
It's
go.
the insurance space for me is
Oh,
a
boy.
very, very, very tough. Whichever area that I have been in the past as a physical therapist, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, it's one of those areas that's tough.
Yeah.
Who gets insurance, what insurance allows, what insurance doesn't, and it continues to change. And it's over the last 20 years, it's changed.
Yeah.
It's absolutely changed over the last 2 decades. And there's a lot of push and pull around those different things and the policies that exist around things like insurance. And the reality is we do not have control over that.
No, there really isn't.
Right? And so the advocacy space about getting what it is that you need for your child, whether it's equipment, whether it is another type of therapy. We talked about intensive therapy in our last episode, and the different things that exist with that. What part of that, though, can you control?
So for me, I remember in general they were covering things, but we were paying for a lot of it initially, because everything was coming back that she was fine, but clearly a child that isn't growing,
Right.
Maybe she is fine, but something's not right. Like when is something not gonna come back right, And I remember just constantly just handing over the HSA card and just hoping that there was still the funds there to pay for it. And after we got the diagnosis, it was like our pass-go card, because there was no standard or protocol for the care of the child with this syndrome.
And this was before the diagnosis, or this was even after the diagnosis?
About the same time.
Okay.
So we had paid out and paid out and paid out, and then all of a sudden we get this, and I'm like, I don't even know what that means, because how do you not have a protocol of care for, isn't there one for people who don't know what they have? So then the questions start. I'm like, well, what do you cover for that? Or what don't you cover for that? And for us, we were very fortunate. They just kind of cover everything after the deductible or whatever, depending on the plan. But they typically don't say no, because they don't know what to do with it.
Right. There's a lot of parents I mean, and that's your story, but a lot of parents, we really struggle in that space of the insurance. And as they get older, things change.
Yeah.
And as different things creep up or different findings are had, we also get additional challenges in the space of what they will cover. A big question mark that's going on right now. There's a lot of changes that's happening in the healthcare field, in the space, right? In the insurance space. Will they continue to cover things like IEPs? Will they continue to cover care? Will they continue to cover the equipment? As and you know this, the equipment, they're expensive.
Yeah.
And so all these different things, because it changes the outcome. Now in the space, again, are we in charge and can we control what Congress decides or what's happening in the insurance space? We can have a voice about it, but
I think that is where it is crucial to yourself and to your family, just your mental state, to realize, like, what is it that you need? Like, look at the situation. Do you need this or do you need that? Do you need to see that doctor? Is that doctor doing anything for you? Because you do have control over that. Early on, I remember, again, COVID was like a godsend because I sat in so many appointments with Georgia and I was just baffled by the fact that they weren't concerned about getting their hands on her and actually looking at her. It was good enough to see her on a screen.
right.
And
as we know, there's a lot more involved.
I was like, how is this even? And that's where my mindset kind of shifted. Like, why am I paying out absurd amounts of money so that she can see these specialists 4 times a year? They're not writing prescriptions for me. They're literally just writing down her story, her journey, and then sending me out the door with the bill. And at that point, I was like, hey, which doctors do I need to keep? Because that's the one I'm going to go to. What therapy do I need to keep? Because that's what I'm going to do. Because I'm not going to keep spending all of this money on something that I can't, say I'm getting something out of it. Now, had we gone down the road and said, maybe we do need to see the cardiologist, or maybe we do need to see the geneticist. Okay, well then go. You can always go back.
Right.
But if you trim it down and find that sweet spot for yourself, you're not running yourself through all those appointments. You're not fighting the insurance over something that probably, honestly, people have so many devices. And how many of those devices do you actually use all the time?
And that's the conversation. So, we started the 8-week parent empowerment program, and we're coming up to, we had a first week where we talked about the power of belief and rewriting your life story, which we're going to talk about a little bit more on another podcast. But we brought up this concept of the fact that we don't know, a lot of parents don't know what questions to ask, right? That's why we put all that in that program around what are the questions that you're asking your doctor? What are the things that you need to pay attention to? What's your gut telling you about different things, and how to adequately communicate that to the doctor in that space to be able to get the question? Because guess what? The answer you get is as good as the question that you give. If you do not understand the space to ask the questions, you're not going to get the answer that you're looking for. Yeah, so the choice of doctors, for sure, we can take a choice in that. But knowing which doctor, the questions to ask, as we were talking about, super important. That leads us into another one for me that I feel like is a big one. Other people's opinions. As parents, they tell me that they feel so much judgment and so many eyes looking, right? And to say, hey, you should be doing this with your kid. You should be doing that with your kid. Or you go out in public and there's a meltdown that happens in that space. And everybody has something to say about it, or what you should do and what would work. And, there's a lot of finger pointing in that space, especially in this group. And so I'm going to throw that to you around that space of other people's opinions.
I'm not the best example on that one. And I say that because early on in my parenting portion of my life, I remember having a conversation with somebody about, the kid doesn't behave in the store, you take them right out. Okay. And then what? And then, as I was thinking about that conversation, we went home. It was not anywhere where my child had misbehaved. It just was kind of a parent conversation. But I remember just thinking, like, if you take them out, then they're not going to learn. Like, they're gonna learn this behavior that, anyway, it turned into a whole thing. But the reality is if you've got a special needs child and they naturally outburst in a loud manner or they're waving their arms around, whose problem is that really? Because you're there to do your shopping, you need to do it, and they have every right to be there in their own personal way.
I was hoping that you said that.
Because if somebody's going to complain about it, I'm more than happy to turn around and say, look, you can go shop on another aisle.
Well, I think it's more of the uncomfortable space.
It is.
That's something that you guys deal with day in, day out, minute after minute. And then someone who doesn't deal in that space, who doesn't understand the space or doesn't understand why the space even exists and what's happening in that moment, and what it took to be able to even have your kids there, or what they're going through, or the overstimulation, or all the different things that come in that space of tantrum. Because remember, we talked about communication. And sometimes the tantrums, even though nobody likes it, it's telling us something. It's a space of communication for the kids and the ability to turn around and control that over time and give them different strategies and different things. But ultimately, it seems like it's more of a, well, you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Rather than
Yeah, and I feel like, I was kind of lucky to have Georgie last, because I was kind of already at that point where I was like, children are allowed at the store, and children do what children do. So if you've got a problem with that, well, you might want to address somebody who really cares about your opinion, because it's not me. Have a good day.
I like that. Well, it's really what you do have control over is your response in that space.
Yeah,
but it's a very volatile space. I mean, truth be told.
Entertaining someone who has no frame of reference is never a good idea.
Yeah. And what do you say to the people who feel like some of that is just an excuse for parents of special needs kids to just not handle their kids?
Who's the expert? I couldn't go into a store and tell another special needs parent how they need to handle that child. I have no idea. Nobody else really knows that. The rest of us need to mind our own business or be helpful.
Well, it's a super individual space. To your point, it's a super individual space, right? And in understanding that also other people that don't have the experience with that they don't know what to do, and sometimes they need a little educating themselves in that space to be able to offset this. I was looking at something on social media, and it was very interesting that when I was coming back from Salt Lake City, remember I was telling you about the sensory room that exists and coming back. There's a space in Dubai, in the airport specifically. Dubai has made it such that they're training individuals and they have specific spaces for these kids to go through. They're shorter lines, they don't have to wait as much. They're specifically trained individuals to deal with that. And that I thought was amazing, because not only that, you're bringing awareness to that space, but also there's a certain amount of understanding of what it takes and what happens in that space that allows people to function, and actually, because there's no reason why, like you said, you guys deserve to be there as well.
Well, and I've seen video footage of that airport. I kind of want to go there just for the airport. Mm-hmm. It looks cool. But unless you unless you really have a concept, and most of us have no idea, like you said, it's an individual space, leave it alone. If you want to try and be helpful, ask, how can I help you? Do you need help? Do you want help? But don't,
I think that's a great space. I think that's a great thing to say. Like, if we were to turn around and say, how can we help? Is there something we can do? As opposed to judging and pointing. How much better that would be for everybody, right? Creating win-win situations and ultimately overcoming whatever that situation is at the time. Now, that also brings me to, what about the self-care space, because I talk to parents a lot about this, the self-care space. I am a firm believer, like in the story I was telling you about feeling invisible, feeling like you don't have a voice. I am a fierce advocate to that. I feel like people need to have voice and need to have that be heard. And in the space here, parents often feel that they
It's impossible.
yeah, they're sacrificing themselves almost, right, in that space to be able to do that. And so what are some of the things that that I feel like the parents feel like they can control around that self-care space, because in their world everything seems to be topsy-turvy, right? They didn't, quote unquote, sign up for this, but this has become the life and this has become what's going on. So what are some of the things that can help in that space?
I think we need to understand it looks, again, it's a very individual case. It's going to look different for me than it is for any other mom.
Sure.
Your support system is different. The way that your day flows is different. Like, you can't compare apples to apples. There's no such thing here. For me, self-care could be that I just got my shower that day. That might be the only time I get. And sometimes I get more than that. Some days I can get up and I can do my journaling. I can, clear my head and I can be prepared for the day. All things that I have control of.
Sit in the hot tub.
Sit in
That
the
was
hot
a thing.
tub.
That was the thing this week.
Been doing that a few times this week. But remember that this is one of those things that, because it gets lost in what we do every day, that sometimes we have to remind ourselves. Sometimes we need somebody else to remind us. And sometimes, as much as I hate it, I need somebody else to create that opportunity. Because I really don't have the brain capacity to remember, I've got to do X, Y, and Z. I've got to plan the school lessons for next week. I've got a bazillion things to do. And I'm supposed to take care. No, there's no time here.
But the uncontrollable space is really that space of feeling like that what if, the worst case scenario, what if. We can go down that what if train from, now till the cows come home. But that's a space of the unknown. And we can't control the unknown, just like we can't control the weather, just like we can't control currently what's happening in Congress, it appears. But the things that we can't control in that space, though, I do feel I feel like creating some habits, some daily habits that allow you to find the time, just as how you schedule an appointment. It's super important for you to schedule your time, right? Just so that our viewers know, today, you're here today without your kids. Usually, they're tag and toe behind you.
I usually have them all.
Right? They're here making noise upstairs. But you're not here today. But even in that space, you being here by yourself, well, your husband had to step in, right, in that role. So who do we ask for help? We can control that.
Yeah.
When do we turn around and say, you know what, this is mom's time? When do I turn around and say, hey, this is date night? When do we turn around and say, hey, we take some of that in, because our mental capacity and what it is that we need to do for ourselves is important, because it is from that space that we are helping our kids. It is from that space that we are making those decisions.
Well, and a lot of times you hear that, you can't feed anyone or, give anyone a drink from an empty cup, or,
right. Absolutely.
There's all kinds of sayings around that.
Yeah, the oxygen mask.
Yeah. And I think we have to really prioritize that in order for us to take care of everything else to our best. But I think that we can almost, most moms in the world, anywhere, have some sort of schedule that they're working off of. Whether it's rigid or not is a different story. But for me, if I can get up in the morning and have half an hour to an hour to myself so that I can kind of clear my head and get ready for the day, I'm much more functional. And if that's the only time I get to kind of take care of me, it works wonders. I am so much more prepared for everything else. No matter how chaotic the rest of that looks, I can handle it better because I've had a little bit of time for me to just let my thoughts out and to just figure out what my hurdles are for the day.
What you said just put the nail on the head there, because in our last conversation around the power of belief, again, rewriting that life story, the one of the biggest things that are not happening is that parents, or when I say parents, by extension, I'm also talking about grandparents. I'm talking about all the individuals that are part of that support system that do this, that feel this burden around that guilt, that grief that they carry around this space. But ultimately, the different things that we can turn around and say, you know what, I have some say in this. And I don't have to, typical way. Emily and I have really been talking a lot about the typical way, the typical thing, everything is typical or normal. But what is normal and what typical and who dictates that, right? And so the ability for you to turn around and make the decision for what's best for you and your family, and do so by whether it's asking for help, understanding your choices, understanding the questions to ask, understanding that you and your responses are your responsibility in how you respond to something, but maybe the thing that you're responding to, you may not have had control over in that space. And so those are the biggest things. The future direction. What would you say, just to kind of wrap things up a little bit, the future direction of where it is that you feel that you guys need to go right now? You're looking at buying a house and moving from the situation that you're in because it has done its purpose, but you're looking for something next. And that brought to my mind this idea of, well, what are we controlling when we talk about creating that life, right? Looking forward, a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what do you want that to look like? And what are you controlling in that space? And what are the things that you're letting go to turn around and achieve that?
So, our conversation before we got on camera today, I realized that in this self-care part of things, kind of letting my thoughts out as far as what it is that I actually want. I started this journaling thing about a week ago, and I just literally just wrote down all these things that I want to do. It doesn't matter if it's, sewing a new dress or going on another vacation or what my house situation looks like. Mm-hmm. I need to know what it is that I want so that this week I can go through and I can say, how am I going to get to that? Where does that fit in? Because if I can tell myself that, these are the things I have to have in a house, and is it reality? Am I going to find that house? Or do I need to adjust my plans so that I can build this house? I don't know which direction I'm going. Like, am I looking at houses or am I looking at land? Am I really gonna sew a dress this week? No, that's not happening. That is definitely gonna push to the other end of the list. We'll look for patterns and we'll just dwell in that one for a while. What I make for dinner, probably should do that before the other things. Here's my grocery list. But you can't plan and you can't take the steps forward until you know what it is that you want.
And I think, guys, oh my gosh, this is a great place for us to wrap this up on, because understanding what you want, that's an internal space. And it's a space that more often than not, parents are not, and again, I'm saying parents, but by extension, all the people that support and help in that space, they're not taking the time to really look at and investigate what it is that they do want. And so we often find that the uncontrollables kind of sweeps in there and kind of makes that overwhelming feeling, takes control of that space, as opposed to understanding, hey, this is what I want, this is what we're working through, this is the type of life that I want for me, my family, my kids, and this is what I'm going to turn around, this is what I'm going to advocate for, this is who I'm going to talk to.
Well, and I feel like once you have that in mind and you have an idea of point A to point B,
yeah,
and how many steps are in between that, you realize the decisions that you have to make, and it cuts out a lot of the noise that you really never even wanted to waste your time on.
Absolutely, because we live in noise. We live in noise. There's a lot of things that distract us from that. So really bringing it back to who we are, what we're about, and what we're working towards. And I'll tell you guys, I truly believe that takes practice. It takes practice because
A
it's
lot.
too easy to get distracted by all the noise and the different things that pulls us in every different direction. And so, as not only that, the journey reveals that.
Yeah.
So as you continue, 10 years ago, what you were thinking and what was going on is probably different than you are today, and that is evolving with you. So so the journaling space is a very great space. Brain dumping, really getting what you feel about that and really planning that out for the future. So this idea of having to fix everything, as opposed to I choose something, I choose to respond, I choose to do this, I choose to go after this, as opposed to just letting people or things or situations give you a reactive space.
Yep.
And then we move towards something rather than just moving away from something. And so I know that you were talking about, you really wanted to tell the viewers like an action step. You wanted to give them something tangible for them to hold on to.
Yeah. Years ago, when we were really, sorting things out with Georgie in the beginning, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he told me, he says, draw a circle on a piece of paper. And if you can control every piece of whatever it is that you're thinking about, put it inside the circle. If you can't control it completely, put it on the outside. And that one was pretty messy because there was a lot at that point. But it really helped me realize where I should be focusing my efforts. Because if I can't control it, then it just needs to be out here and do whatever it's going to do. I can't change it. But if it's inside that circle and I have the control, that makes choices. That gives me options. And that gives me direction in what it is that I can focus on, where I really can spend my energy to get what I want, to get where I want.
That's super powerful. And we've done this with some of our clients in the past, and it's something that we're going to do in the 8-week parent empowerment program as well. And as Emily said, what we've been doing as we're talking here, we've been putting some things down to demonstrate to you guys what that's going to look like. So you guys can, you guys should be seeing that as we were talking about the different things, whether it's politics, whether it's diagnosis, insurance policies being some of the uncontrollables. And on the controllable side, the actions that we have, the education that we seek, the way that we approach things, the response to that place, the self-care, right? Going to do your nails or, having a girls' night out, having a trip, whatever it is, but really letting that be led by what you want. So ultimately, if this conversation has spoken to you, if you're ready to continue rewriting that parent space and that life space for you, your families, we want you guys I want to invite you guys to our family, the NeuroPedia Connect family, as the Breaking Limits podcast is part of that family, where we're really bringing up these things to further discuss the things that are coming up in this world so that we can be equipped to turn around and make those decisions to create the life that, parents want to create for their kids, and not lose themselves in the process. Because you guys are walking this journey, you just don't have to walk it alone, right? We want to help you guys shift from that space of feeling like you're just surviving to empowering. And so I invite you guys to also join our Facebook group. We have a Facebook group called Beyond the Diagnosis, where we're writing life for families of special needs kids. Would like for you guys to join us, introduce yourselves, and let us know what's going on, what you guys are dealing with, and how we can help. But today we named the noise. We try to quiet the noise and have you guys have more control in that space to be able to really create the life that you deserve. And even on the messy days, on the uncertain days, the days that filled up with questions, you guys can be powerful in that space. So I want to leave you guys with this quote, and because I saw this and I was like, this is kind of wraps up what we were talking about today. Its peace isn't found in controlling everything. It's found in choosing what to carry and what to let go of. So, as you guys know how to deal, please click the like, subscribe, or comment, and we'd love to hear more from you guys. With that, thank you, Emily, for the conversation. I'm Dr. Vivian Pierre, signing off, episode 3 of Controllables and Uncontrollables, taking back control where you guys don't feel stuck. Thanks again for joining us.